former candidate for the U.S. Senate, longtime radio talk show host, author, and conservative policy advocate.
Justices to the Supreme Court, the left has been in open panic.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Are Democrats playing Whac-a-Mole with the next generation of Republican presidential contenders? Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. They spent 4 years trying to take down Trump. They succeeded. So how come the Democrats are still so angry that they're libeling, whack-a-moling the Republicans who pop up and show promise for 2024? We'll examine just how low the leftists are going in trying to take down first Ron DeSantis and now Tim Scott. And we'll take it to the other end with a discussion on how Florida, led by DeSantis, has become the new hotbed for conservatism, as we're joined by LibertyNation.com editor-in-chief Lisa K. Donner, and how it's actually a mild-mannered Democrat who could wind up being the savior of the Republic, even though he never intended to be. We'll explain. Plus, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza discusses Derek Chauvin asking the court for a new trial in the murder of George Floyd and other topics affecting your individual liberty on Talkin' Liberty.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out a virtual assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. After the 2016 election, Republicans danced a bit on the grave of Hillary Clinton, but mostly rejoiced in the election of Donald Trump. The 2020 election, which should have been a cause for celebration for Democrats who captured not only the White House, but maintained a tenuous control of the House and seized power in the Senate. But instead of being overjoyed at taking down the evil orange man, they remain angry and have tried to play whack-a-mole by viciously kneecapping any Republican who might try to pop up and follow Trump in 2024. They're doing it to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, victim of a libelous hit piece on TV's 60 Minutes. And now, you want to know how bad it's gotten on the emboldened but still bitter and know nothing left? Here's how bad. Rising star and black Republican Senator Tim Scott, descendant of slaves, after delivering the response to Joe Biden's quasi-State of the Union address in which he said America is not a racist nation, was lectured on race by daytime chat-up host Joy Behar of The View.
Tim Scott, he does not seem to understand, and a lot of them don't seem to understand, the difference between a racist country and a systemic racism. They don't seem to get the difference. Yes, maybe it's not a racist country. Maybe Americans, the majority, are not racist. But we live in a country with systemic racism.
You know, I never did figure out why a complete unfunny zero like Joy Behar seems to captivate women across the country. Perhaps it unfortunately says more about the country than even the rank absurdity of Joy Behar lecturing anyone on racism. But then there's the anchors on MSNBC accusing any white person who doesn't believe in the New York Times 1619 Project and its central conclusion that America was founded for the express purpose of furthering slavery and is thus irredeemable, of automatically being racist. MSNBC weekend anchor Tiffany Cross lined up to take her own pot shots at the South Carolina senator.
This week, the sole black Republican in the Senate sounded a stone fool when he said this.
Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country.
Okay, let's be clear. Tim Scott does not represent any constituency other than the small number of sleepy, slow-witted sufferers of Stockholm Syndrome who get elevated to prominence for repeating a false narrative about this country that makes conservative white people feel comfortable.
That woman went on to say Tim Scott should be called Uncle Tim because he's not down with the racial grievances of the progressive left. Then there's MSNBC's infamous Joy Reid saying any white person who still believes the false narrative about the country perpetrated over the last, almost 250 years is, of course, a racist.
Thanks to the New York Times' seminal 1619 project, which traces the consequences of slavery from its inception centuries ago to its modern-day implications for Black Americans, we've seen a growing movement to reframe how American history is taught in public schools. Well, some parents who are opposed to critical race theory as new curriculum aren't too pleased.
Just because I do not want critical race theory taught to my children in school does not mean that I'm a racist, damn it.
Actually, it does.
Actually, it does. Yes, if you don't believe critical race theory, that the country was founded for the express purpose of establishing a new beachhead for slavery, then you, my friend, are a racist, and you don't even know it. Meanwhile, we might as well call the vice president Root Cause Kamala, because after being put in charge of the Biden border crisis, instead of trying to fix the problem here, she speaks of trying to get to the root causes of the problem in their countries, as she emphasized this week in what was billed as an important address on foreign relations by the vice president.
We are all well aware of the immediate situation. The citizens of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras are leaving their homes at alarming rates. They leave only when they feel they must. We want to pick back up the kind of work President Joe Biden started when he was vice president. And so we are focused on addressing both the acute factors and the root causes of migration: corruption, violence, and poverty.
Raise your hand if you think Kamala Harris can fix or even affect corruption, violence, and poverty in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Yeah, I thought so. She has yet to even visit the border in the 100-plus days of the Biden administration, likely because doing so would only draw attention to a crisis the Biden-friendly media is all too happy to keep on the down low. At the same time, the Republican Party, in a position to benefit from the overwoking of America by the Democrats, are in the throes of an intra-party war as they prepare for the midterms next year, needing to pick up only 4 seats to gain control of the House and 1 in the Senate, after the third-ranking House Republican Liz Cheney voted to impeach then-President Trump and then doubled down with her words. She was met with a torrent of attacks from Trump's supporters, leading to a schism that threatens to split the party in two. And this week, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy was caught on a hot mic discussing Cheney.
I think she's got real problems. I've had it with her. It's, I've lost confidence.
The edited audio, which does not include the questions, a clear sign the Wyoming Congresswoman's days in House leadership are numbered.
Well, someone just has to bring emotion, but I assume that will probably take place.
Liz Cheney is receiving aid and comfort on the Senate side from Mitt Romney, who, of course, is a declared enemy of President Trump, and by inference, the people who support him. But much of the attention in national politics is actually turning to California, where Governor Gavin Newsom is facing a recall election next month. A number of Republicans are lined up to try and take his place. And the most intriguing of all has to be Caitlyn Jenner, the famed former man and one-time Olympic decathlon champion, running as, of all things, a transgender conservative who released her first campaign ad this week decrying the state of things in California.
We had what everyone else wanted. The American dream grew up here. Yet career politicians and their policies have destroyed that dream. It's been locked away, closed, shuttered, left in the dark, burned down. The government is now involved in every part of our lives. They've taken our money, our jobs, and our freedom. California needs a disruptor, a compassionate disruptor.
Now that is a catchphrase, a compassionate disruptor. Are we talking Trump without the bombast? Finally, in the category of what I guess you would call a hatchet job on an enemy or rival, couched as only a politician can do by good news, the embattled mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, who's had a very open feud with Governor and fellow Democrat Andrew Cuomo, announced on Monday that Cuomo should call it quits, but then followed it up with good news for all Americans.
He should resign. He can't continue to lead nursing home scandal, sexual harassment and assault scandal, using his staff to write his book. I mean, it doesn't end. He just has to go. Our plan is to fully reopen New York City on July 1st. We are ready for stores to open, for businesses to open, offices, theaters, full strength. Because look, what we're seeing is people have gotten vaccinated in extraordinary numbers, 6.3 million vaccinations in New York City.
And over 200 million vaccinations across the nation to date. But if you're like me, I bet you felt more than a few times over the last year plus that we might never see the country open again. But if they can make it happen in New York, as the song goes, they can make it happen anywhere. We'll break away for a moment, then come back to discuss how the man who might save this constitutional republic from tyranny is a Democrat.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Could it be that the man who will save this constitutional republic from the slings and arrows of the ascendant collectivists intent on mangling the U.S. Constitution beyond recognition is, gasp, a Democrat? You could be excused for expressing incredulity at that thought, given that it is the Democratic Party which has threatened or promised to mow down so many basic constitutional guardrails. Given their druthers, the party of Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer would turn territories into states to assure a virtually permanent Senate majority, transform the Supreme Court from an independent judiciary into a mere rubber stamp for the party in power, and abolish the one long-standing rule which protects the political minority from being steamrolled by the majority. They'd place limits on free speech, pass onerous new gun control laws, and ran through a full-on Green New Deal, and the list of less prominent woke initiatives goes on and on. Fortunately for conservatives of all stripes, though, it appears that the Democrats have a skunk at their garden party. His name is Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, who's fast becoming the bane of the left's existence. This near-extinct Democrat dinosaur, something resembling a conservative, representing a state won overwhelmingly by Trump twice, claims he will draw a line in the sand and refuse to cast the 50th vote in favor of virtually any of the left's third-rail agenda. In arguably the most partisan Congress in our lifetime, Manchin's vote alone will prevent Vice President Kamala Harris from breaking ties and sending bills onto the White House for the pro forma signature of President Biden. The latest proclamation by the 73-year-old former West Virginia governor and two-term senator is that he will oppose statehood for the District of Columbia, infuriating afresh the activist left, which has been all over his case ever since the Democrats forged a last-minute tie in the upper chamber with twin victories in Georgia. Manchin had already enraged progressives by opposing the termination of the Senate filibuster, central to the fulfillment of the progressive wish list, and the Equality Act, another item high on Biden's agenda, after similarly standing against same-sex marriage over the years. He looks favorably upon the Republican Alternative Infrastructure Plan And Manchin even stalled for hours before reluctantly joining the paper-thin majority to ram through Biden's signature accomplishment to date, the almost $2 trillion omnibus bill dressed up as COVID relief legislation. Democrat leaders have, by most accounts, tried everything from gentle persuasion to threatening and cajoling. Manchin's been hyper-flamed on social media. But there's as yet no indication Manchin will back down. Perhaps this is because the senior senator from West Virginia is actually expressing the overwhelming consensus in his own state instead of caving into the national party demanding fealty to its most radical initiatives. Outside of whatever president's been in office, the most powerful person in Washington for so many years was a so-called swing vote on the Supreme Court. First Sandra Day O'Connor, then Anthony Kennedy. Most every decision on a hot-button issue hung on their single vote. But with the current 6-3 conservative majority on the court, the most crucial swing vote in the country now belongs to this mild-mannered senator from a small state. None among this trio likely suspected they would rise solely by circumstance to such a pivotal position on decisions, legislative or judicial, of utmost importance to the future of the republic. Manchin said in a recent article in USA Today that he never sought this kind of power and doesn't exactly savor it. But here he is, thrust into a position he never sought, but for which history will surely remember him. He can single-handedly, in some cases joined by Arizona's Kirsten Sinema, decide whether ideas as far-reaching as court-packing, radical climate change legislation, and pork-laden omnibus schemes sink or swim. But rest assured, the left will continue turning up the heat on Manchin, alternately shaming, lecturing, arm-twisting, though they've so far met with little success. Unlike his president, Joe Manchin has thus far refused to bow to a vice grip of pressure and kowtow to the left's most damaging brainstorms of the day. So this modest moderate from the heartland stands as a most unlikely bulwark against collectivist tyranny. And as Simon and Garfunkel put it regarding another guy named Joe in a quintessentially American yet far less consequential realm, Joe Manchin, the nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Quick break, and then we're back to discuss how the Sunshine State is fast becoming the new hotbed for conservatism.
Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Mark Angelides, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Scott Cosenza, and this is Liberty Nation.
Now let's take a look at the LibertyNation.com electoral leaderboard. It's still 238 for Joe Biden.
What if stories and legends can offer us the key to unraveling the hottest political issues of the day and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics?
Impeach 45!
Only where freedom of speech is honored can people who look, sound, or think differently be truly free.
If you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other is zero.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now president.
With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
LibertyNation.com. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
With Donald Trump gone and the GOP in utter disarray, in the throes of a vicious battle for the soul of the party between Trumpists and Bushies, which we discussed in the last segment, conservatives are desperately seeking solid ground, a safe haven, a place where one of theirs is in charge, where Trump did well, where conservative governance is ascendant. And the state which fits that exact profile in 2021 is Florida. And joining me is a woman with whom I have passed many an hour in the Sunshine State and thus knows of what she and I speak. She's the far better half of this particular union, LibertyNation.com editor-in-chief Lisa K. Donner. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Tim.
Thanks for joining. Now, how is it that this traditional battleground state went counter to the reported national trend and actually gave Trump a bigger victory in 2020 than in 2016?
Well, I think DeSantis had quite a bit to do with it. I mean, well, first of all, they changed their election laws a while back, and that helped. But, you know, I think Floridians were feeling pretty good going into November, despite the pandemic, where a lot of other states, you know, they were locked down, et cetera, and they were getting the message that Trump wasn't doing a good job. Well, in Florida, things I think were a little bit freer and easier. And so people weren't feeling like they needed a change. Now, there were times when people were asked to mask up on the beach, but in general, I think Florida has weathered COVID just about as good as it gets.
So is Florida's conservative turn due mostly to Trump and DeSantis, do you think? Or do you sense the transformation is more permanent in that state?
Well, there's a lot going on in that state right now. As I talked about in my article that Florida is sizzling hot on LibertyNation.com, we have a situation where the real estate market is just going through the roof. I mean, you can't even get your property on a multi-list, and it's gone, and people are overbidding the asking price. So, you know, Florida, people are moving to Florida. Now, Florida didn't have a big tourism this year, but the people who went liked what they saw.
You had a chance for an up-close and personal with then-candidate Ron DeSantis in 2018. Does it seem as clear to you as to me that DeSantis thinks himself the next coming of Donald Trump?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because DeSantis was the keynote speaker at the Heritage President's Club leadership dinner weekend. Anyway, he was the keynote speaker, and he really brought down the house. People were impressed with him. I don't think it's a surprise that DeSantis has elevated to the point where he is right now. I think he's been thinking about it for a long time, doing all the right things, shaking hands with all the right people, and his chickens are coming home to roost.
Well, so then there's a question going forward about trying to unite a balkanized party. Do you see DeSantis as someone who can play ball with party regulars enough to make him more palatable to establishment types than Donald Trump?
Well, I think he is very palatable to those types, which is why he is really working hard to position himself as a America First candidate. He really wants those Trumpists.
Now, Disney World, perhaps the most famous and popular landmark in Florida, says it will override Governor DeSantis' orders and continue to require COVID protocols. Now, does this make DeSantis look better or worse, do you think, with the national spotlight suddenly shining on him as an outspoken Trump supporter with a Trump-like agenda?
No, I don't think so, Tim, because businesses have the right to do what they want to do. Publix is asking people, that's the big supermarket chain in Florida, they're asking people to still wear masks. So they have a right to do that. But look, Disney World is going strong because of Ron DeSantis. They only spent 2 months in the dark. Out in California, Disneyland has been open for a grand total of 6 days. I mean, they are where they are because of Ron DeSantis. So they have a right to make their own rules and regs, and they go ahead and do that. But you know, they've been making money all this time while Disneyland out in California has been starving because of Ron DeSantis.
Okay, so Lisa, let's go to your article now on Donald Trump, who recently floated a Trump-DeSantis ticket and his plans for 2024. Two words in your article struck me. He's in. Why did you write that?
Well, this was based on a interview he did with Candace Owens. And, he said, now is not the right time, but I think my supporters are going to be very, very, very happy. Well, that's code for I'm going to run for office. Now things could change between now and then. Things could happen, but he sounded like a man who was ready to saddle up again.
Okay, so Lisa, let's go to your article now on Donald Trump, who recently floated a Trump-DeSantis ticket and his plans for 2024. Two words in your article struck me. He's in. Why did you write that?
Well, this was based on a interview he did with Candace Owens. And, he said, now is not the right time, but I think my supporters are going to be very, very, very happy. Well, that's code for I'm going to run for office. Now things could change between now and then. Things could happen, but he sounded like a man who was ready to saddle up again.
If he runs, can he win a second term?
In many ways, DeSantis proves to be the better candidate because he's, I think, more palatable to the Republicans in name only, the Mitt Romneys, the Bushies. But I just don't think DeSantis can go up against Trump. Nobody wants to. Nikki Haley said she wouldn't go up against Trump. Marco Rubio said he was sort of interested. But, Trump is the 200-pound gorilla. He still has a lot of supporters. And I think it would be very hard to run against him.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me on Liberty Nation Radio.
Lisa K. Dunner, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com. Quick break, and then we're back with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Facebook upholds the ban on Trump, but says it can't be indefinite. Chauvin petitions for a new trial. And the U.S. planning to ban menthol cigarettes. Those among the stories we're covering this week as we fly into Talkin' Liberty with our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com, legal affairs editor, and the man you've come to know as our guardian of individual liberty, Scott D. Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Tim. Thank you very much.
Well, you are welcome, as always, now. The Facebook Oversight Board has upheld the ban on Trump that happened a while back, but it says it can't be indefinite. There was an article on LibertyNation.com saying that basically it was a loss for Trump, but a loss for Facebook as well. Would you agree with that?
They have so many people who work at the company, Tim, who might quit and leave, and they might lose half their workforce if they granted Trump's account back. So I don't know how woke it actually is over there.
So tell us about the Oversight Board.
Tim, the reason why I wanted to cover it is because I had seen so much other coverage throughout the week that discussed the story like there was some kind of genuine court involved, like there was the right to due process, for instance, for Donald Trump, like evidentiary rules would be upheld or something like that. And that is nothing close to the truth. This is just a Facebook derived body that can do whatever they want. They don't have to apply any rules. There's no appeals. It's just absolutely just as easy as saying Mark Zuckerberg's decision. It happens to be farmed out to a few other people. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that the notion that this was somehow like an independent Facebook court where Donald Trump could go and like have a fair hearing about his post is absolutely absurd.
But the left is upset that the ban wasn't made permanent.
Tim, it's an outrage that white supremacists like Donald Trump. No, yeah, I mean, of course they are. They are neo-fascists or just fascists, I guess. Pick your group to ally with when you want to crush the free speech of others. They have justification for that it's hate speech or otherwise. But every censor justifies their censorious desires in the good. They don't say they have nefarious motives for banning the speech of others.
So, Derek Chauvin is petitioning for a new trial for the murder of George Floyd. What are his chances, and what's it based on?
So we've talked a lot about throughout Liberty Nation properties, including, I think, the radio show and the podcast, The Uprising, and on print about juror number 52, Mr. Brandon Mitchell, who's been on a media tour discussing incidents around the trial and his deliberations. Some of the appeal is based on that, Tim, but some of it, or most of it, I should say, is based on other matters that were already out there in terms of Mr. Chauvin. He being Mr. Eric Nelson, his attorney, alleges that he didn't receive a fair trial due to, for instance, the pretrial publicity, the lack of sequestration, which only took place after all the arguments were over, not moving the trial, and other matters. I think there were 10 plus all in that weren't counting juror number 52's revelations that Mr. Nelson thought gave rise to a new trial. And also, Tim added the count that even if one of those alone didn't meet the burden for requiring this kind of relief, the sum total of all the impositions on Mr. Chauvin's rights, that they've all kind of death by a thousand cuts, if you will, that's one of the arguments that he should get a new trial.
So what are the chances he gets one?
Well, this is not a great. I'm not a great odds maker here in this instance, Tim, but it is far better than zero. This is not a pie in the sky shot. It's also far from a gimme. I would say, let's call it 20% chance.
Well, Scott, as someone who grew up enjoying, among others, the wonders of Newport cigarettes, I had my little run with menthol cigarettes back in the day, and was startled to learn that the U.S. is now set to ban menthol cigarettes.
You know, Tim, we talked about this a couple of years ago when the then FDA commissioner, I think it was Scott Gottlieb was his name, was saying that he was going to ban all flavored e-vape solutions. And the president of the United States put the kibosh on that. There was a political uprising from the right, from the sort of conservatarians who said, hey, we're using this to get off of actual leaf tobacco cigarettes, and you should leave adults to their own, right? You know, we're legalizing marijuana everywhere, but criminalizing these nicotine products. Well, here we have a similar thing, only this is being couched in terms of racial justice. African Americans, by and large, prefer menthol cigarettes. I think 80%, they say, of African Americans who smoke menthols, and it's being played out like it's this boon to the health of African Americans. And I just want to say that, you know, it's great juxtaposition next to the Chauvin story. I know we've talked about the Eric Garner case many times, who was convicted of or was alleged to have been selling cigarettes illegally. How many black men are going to die, Tim, not from lung cancer or emphysema or COPD, but from police interactions when menthols are banned? Yet there's this huge market, especially in the black community, for menthol cigarettes. Who's going to fill that demand? By and large, it's going to be African Americans, who are then going to be subject to enforcement action because of this.
Certainly you're not suggesting that the federal government doesn't know better than individuals about their tolerance.
You know what? Let me make a note of that. I apologize if I gave that impression. Certainly not.
Thank you. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, I'll write it down later.
Okay, Scott, so let's move over to an organization that sure has been on the minds of a lot of people over the last year, plus the Centers for Disease Control. And a federal judge has thrown out a CDC eviction moratorium.
This is Judge Dabney Friedrich of the U.S. District Court for D.C., and this just affects the CDC order. It doesn't affect any state or other local eviction moratorium. But, Tim, the federal government in the CDC had ordered that they could implement any law, rule, or regulation as long as that agency head, in their sole determination, thought it was necessary to prevent the spread of illness, as if they had literally the power to just create any rule under God's green earth for this purpose. And it was dialed back considerably by Judge Friedrich, who made the nexus between any rule the actual prevention of the disease itself. So pesticide, elimination of pests if that's what's causing it, or cleaning of bacteria, that kind of thing, not grand social laws and regulations like with the breadth of which even Congress hasn't attempted.
Well, in this woke culture, Scott, we're seeing more and more stories like this next one of an ex-Virginia Tech college soccer player suing the coach who benched her after she refused to kneel during a protest.
All is not well in Hokie Nation, Tim. That's right. This is a case of compelled speech. So in addition to the First Amendment allowing people to speak without punishment, which I think most of the cases we talk about probably are, there's also the slice of the pie, which is that the First Amendment protects people from having to speak something they don't want to speak. This is a government school. They have to follow the First Amendment. Virginia Tech is a state school. Kirsten Henning refused to kneel in celebration of the Black Lives Matter movement, and she was benched and then basically run off the team, is her allegation in court. And I think we're going to see more First Amendment challenges to this sort of thing as it becomes more sort of part of society, this sort of required genuflecting.
Has the coach indicated that, yes, I sat her down because I didn't like her political views, or we're trying to claim it was because of some physical limitation, or what?
We haven't seen the reply yet, Tim, but it'll be interesting to see. This is civil court. It's not criminal court, so the coach will have to be they will conduct a deposition, and we'll learn at least what he claims then was the real reason behind the benching.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Mark Angelides, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Scott Cosenza, and this is Liberty Nation.
Now let's take a look at the LibertyNation.com electoral leaderboard. It's still 238 for Joe Biden.
What if stories and legends can offer us the key to unraveling the hottest political issues of the day and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics?
Impeach 45!
Only where freedom of speech is honored can people who look, sound, or think differently be truly free.
If you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other is zero.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now president.
With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
LibertyNation.com